everyone. Sorry, this is my natural voice. Martin's going to take care of it right away. Wow, it's really, really cool to be here talking to so many of you, and I'll get a lot of exercise for my neck. I woke up with an incredible migraine this morning, and I spent most of the morning in bed, and not only was I suffering, but I was talking with someone on the phone in London, and I said, oh my God, I woke up with this unbelievable migraine, and I just feel terrible. He goes, what? Is that the posh word for hangover? So I wish it were, but I'm here, and it's my great pleasure to be here with my friend Chris Jansen. We're going to be talking about getting your open source company to contribution, and I'll give you the very, very brief conceptual model. Chris discovered in the last few years at work that a lot of developers working on open source stuff wanted to contribute and felt blocked, practically blocked, emotionally blocked, or what have you, and worked out ways to help them begin to contribute. I have the feeling, Martin, is that better? I think that's a little better, right? Yeah. And interviewed a bunch of people in the Drupal community and other open source communities, and came up with some really good ideas about helping us do what we want as open source developers, which is make our open source stuff better for all of us, right? I hope that's what we all want. At the same time, we started talking. I was one of his original interviewers in the original project, and I've been working from a very different direction on open source thinking and business and problem solving, and I had been doing a lot of thinking about, hey, how do you explain to management and to business people, especially because in our growing ecosystem there are businesses that are managed by non-open source people, how do you explain to those people why actually we need to fully engage with our projects? If we just download free code because it's free, we're not really getting anything like what we could get out of being in open source, right? So conceptually, we have me coming in to talk with, well, who's in management? You can admit it's cool, it's cool, it's cool. Somebody's got to like pay the bills, right? Is anybody in sales here? You're also our friends. Oh, nobody wants to admit it. Okay, and who is a developer? Fun. Okay, so today we've come into your company, right, as consultants. Chris is a developer guy, I'm the business guy. I want to sit down with your management and I want to talk about how to really properly engage with open source software and how, like, the fact that there's measurable business value, there's actual benefit in contributing to open source and how we're going to get there. And Chris is going to talk about the developer perspective on unblocking that and making it happen on a practical level. Please give a really warm round of applause to my friend Chris Jansen. This is his first keynote. This is his first keynote at a big conference, and I'm really, 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 really pleased to have him with me. Why don't you tell us about yourself, Chris?
Right. So please be gentle. You know, it's my first one. My name is Chris Jansen. I currently work at Decent in the UK. I'm a remote worker there. I've been developing PHP software, especially for and in Drupal for the past 5 years. Before that, I've always been interested in programming, developing stuff in different languages. So I'm a father. I love open source. I've always loved it. And I contribute heavily to it wherever I can. Back to Jam.
Everybody calls me Jam, except my mother at this point. I work at an open source company called Acquia. We provide products and services around the Drupal platform, mostly, and one of the big pivots that we've gone through in the last few years now is all of the technical stuff that was transformational a few years ago, offering really reliable hosting or scalability or support, all that stuff for open source, is now kind of commodity. A lot of people can do that, and we do it quite well. So there's another layer of activity on top of our stuff now, which is enabling all of this digital marketing, personalization, and especially managing a massive number of sites across large organizations. So we're doing that. I have a fun title, which is evangelist. I'm most active. You can find me at dev.acquia.com. I have a podcast. I had fixed the problem with the stream on that podcast, and starting this week or next, it's going to be back on iTunes, which I'm really happy about. And I've done more than 200 conversations with people from Drupal, from open source, a lot of people in PHP, and also interesting people who are doing things with open source who are not necessarily in any of our communities, like how our ideas are leaking out and doing stuff. And I have fun with it, and it's a real privilege to be able to work with open source as a job like this. Today, I gave you the introduction. We could talk about, just to make sure that we're on the same page, like why is it good to use open source, you know, and why contribution is important from a business perspective. Now we're going to talk about roadblocks, both strategic and operational to contribution, talk about getting those out of the way and going on and contributing. Nobody made a greater mistake than they who did nothing because they could do only a little. I think this is relevant to us sometimes, and it's maybe the core of the beginning of your story. I'm not going to file a bug. This isn't working, but I'm not going to file a bug report because I'm just going to look like a whiny complainer, right? Have you ever thought that? Or like, oh, you know, this spelling is wrong in my language translation, but you know, it's so, why bother? Like, I'm not going to write a patch for that. You know, it's not worth a pull request. But I think that given the way the world is going, and given the amount of problems and the amount of unpleasant situations in the world, we in open source are working together across nations, across continents, across industries, across professions to do something amazing together. And I think that the vast number of us are also, I think we want to make the world a better place, okay? And I can't fix the politics in any given country by myself, unfortunately, and I can't fix war, right? But I can make Drupal run better. I can add something to Symfony and make it better. And I've made the world a little bit better for all of us. So, please contribute. Just to establish that we're also like walking the walk. Talk about decent for a second, Chris.
Right. So, as you can see, Decent loves open source, but they truly do. It's one of the major reasons why I joined the company. Over the past 5 years, I've worked for several companies in several different stages of contribution maturity, and I've constantly been searching for an organization that was actually, you know, putting their money where their mouth was, and yeah, actively contributing whatever they did. So I joined Decent partly because they were really actively hiring, and they still are. Could I have this one? They still are for several different functions within the organization. So, you know, some of the key things they do and offer, feel free to check them out.
But Chris, do they do Symfony?
Sure they do.
Oh.
Especially...
But Chris, can I get paid contribution time at your company?
Absolutely. Going back to the previous slide, my colleague Christian is being paid 1 day a week to work on his Drupal module. I have a Drupal module of my own, well, several, but the largest one is one I'm going to be paid for as well. And pretty much everybody who has a good project can get a day of paid contribution time for it. So check them out. On to Jan.
So when I joined Acquia, there were 18 of us, and I think about 17 were technical. I was in engineering at the time. We've grown to be almost 800. We've taken a lot of venture capital, and we deal with a lot of clients. And I'm really, really proud to be at a company where we've actually spent millions of dollars of that money on contributing to open source. In our case, obviously, especially Drupal, but we invested $500,000 in Drupal 8 module upgrades. We had full-time employees who do nothing but release manager for Drupal core, people who the people who've built the multilingual functionality in Drupal 8, put big pipe content delivery in, and caching system into Drupal. All of those are colleagues of mine at Acquia, and it's really wonderful to be in a place that is doing its best to combine doing business with very, very large clients and doing the right thing by open source. So that's fun, and I'm also allowed to go around talking about this kind of stuff, so that's also a great privilege.
So as Jem said in the introduction, I've done quite a bit of research on, how developers and organizations are blocked in their efforts to contribute. And I've actually talked to many developers and spoken with many business owners and actually done a whole bunch of research inside of a medium-sized organization to figure out how to make that organization able to contribute more to open source software. And I started out by just mapping the problem, by just asking people, how are you blocked? What struggles do you encounter when you are trying to contribute to open source software? And pretty much 3 of them stood out. I made them stand out in the slide as well. Lack of knowledge, doubt, and lack of time. Those were the 3 major reasons they cited as to why they weren't contributing as much as they want to. I then went on and tried to figure out what made these actual blockers worse. How do they interact to make people actually blocked? Because on their own, there are things that you can overcome, but put together, they can actually stop somebody from contributing. Once I mapped out those, I went in and I tried to figure out, possible solutions to the problem. And from all of that came quite a few ideas on how to fix it. So, Jem's going to tell you a little bit about the benefits of using open source software, and then I'm going to, continue tell how to use it.
Yeah.
How to do it.
So, as open source people, this should be obvious, and I just want to run through a couple things quickly to make sure that we're on the same page. But this is the kind of conversation that we have with people less familiar than us with what we're doing. And obviously, I'm leaving out the, are you crazy? How can you make money by giving away your stuff? Like, I don't have time for that question. But, because we have a license fee that is 0, because in the case of our projects, we have a lot of people contributing their work back, because of all of that, we can get projects out quicker, faster, and cheaper, right? And this gives an improved return on investment. You can do fun tricks like if you find out what someone's budget is, you can offer them a better project for the same price tag rather than offering them a cheaper project. And given that there are thousands of service providers around the world who do stuff with PHP, each and every one of us is really obliged to do our very best work and provide the very best service that we can, because if our clients aren't happy, right, they can walk away and find somebody else down the street in the next town who's going to be able to do what we do plus minus at some similar quality level. So this is perversely, this is a very attractive sales position, because you can say, look, honestly, I am going to do my best for you because you don't have to be here talking with me. And it's a pretty powerful sales argument. Look, IT projects, and this is really, really important to explain, IT projects are all expensive. They have a whole bunch of costs involved in them that you simply can't get around. So there's no difference between a proprietary system and an open source system when it comes to this sort of thing. However, if you compare a proprietary system to an open source system, when it comes to the freedom to innovate, all of a sudden you can say, oh, well, if our system doesn't do that, well, we can build that for you. How about we build it now, right? And systems like Symfony and Drupal are very much on the cutting edge of delivering the web, and the web is 80% PHP anyway. So, if somebody needs a Twitter integration today, it's very, very likely that millions of people are going to need Twitter integrations tomorrow. Business cases are very similar across businesses, so we get huge amount of momentum in there. And it's kind of an old story, but you know, did anybody here build a social network on Ning? It was a, like, oh yeah. Aha, Jordy did, cool. Twice? Oh, okay. So when they went out of business, they had the charming final chapter where they would charge you money to have your data back. So, you know, we're trying to avoid that kind of a situation with what we do. And you get to this really, really powerful moment in which you do not tell your potential clients that this stuff is free. That's setting up a bad expectation. But you tell them that the license fee for what you're going to use for them, that happens to be zero money. And given that you're spending zero money to have the license, every single piece of currency that you invest, right, goes straight into features. It goes straight into something useful, because we're downloading millions of hours of coding that's been tested, that's been used. It's great, right? So we can immediately invest in what you need and how to differentiate. That's really powerful, right? Building a proof of concept is a matter of asking me to sit down for a week and work on it. So that costs my salary for a week, but that's about it, right? As long as I already have a computer. And we have this story about building better projects rather than cheaper projects. So if you reallocate money that you would have spent on a license fee, you can put it into hiring new people, into training them, into more testing, into, you know, features and what have you. And so that's great. We can build better, factually we can build better projects with open source, given that we, especially us in this room, are using major widely adopted projects. We can build you better projects for the same amount of money. So, I think that that's the wrong slide, but we talk, so these are some quotes from Drupal people, Drupal business owners, right? Why do we contribute? Why do we contribute to open source, right? And they're like, yeah, community, you know, pay it forward. And I guess if we're sitting in the middle of it, and we're very idealistic people generally in open source, that makes some kind of emotional sense to us. But, right, our customers don't care about that at all. Right? Our potential clients don't care about that at all. These are not valid business reasons. These reasons, it feels good doesn't pay the bills. It's really, really hard to measure any ROI on because it's the right thing to do. So you need to define business reasons to contribute. And we just rebuilt this deck, and I'm really confused about why this is here. So I'm going to talk about reasons that improve your company with contribution. So we have an idea that there are strategic roadblocks that are involved, like a lack of vision, a lack of policy, a lack of support, a lack of understanding by management, and we have operational roadblocks, which are you know, fear, doubt, self-doubt about your own competence, am I allowed to, that sort of thing. So I want to address these strategic roadblocks, which are kind of the area, the management area. Who's heard about this golden circle? Does that look familiar? There's a guy called Simon Sinek who did an amazing TED Talk in 2009, and he talked about, it's called How Great Leaders Inspire Action, and he wrote a book called Start With Why. But essentially, the idea is, if you don't know why you're doing something and you just sort of rush at contributing and writing patches, you're not really going to know what you or your organization needs and what's going to be effective and where you should start and why, and that's very, very hard to measure. And in business, we like to be able to measure things nowadays a lot. So if you don't have a why are we contributing? You don't have a common vision. So Chris encountered, excitingly, at the company he worked at, the management of this company that was dealing exclusively with open source software. They're like, yeah, we contribute. Oh yeah, so why is that? Because, right? And how is it that we know that we're being effective at that? We don't, right? So it turned out that this management, none of them they'd never had this conversation. They weren't on the same page at all about why to contribute, what the potential benefits would be. Okay, so if you can figure out why you should contribute, that lets you can come to a consensus about it, and if you have a consensus as management, you can hand on a mandate to your technical departments that says, we will contribute, and maybe you can offer them budget, maybe you can offer them official support, and you say, hey, IT management or developers or technical, however you want to do it, hey, go and contribute. You might even want to say these kinds of contribution, we think they're better. But create us a policy of how you want to do this and show it to us. And so you have a management on the same page, giving a mandate to us technical folks downstairs saying, okay, we agree on exactly how that's going to work, and then we can actually contribute effectively, and we can show that maybe we need investors, right? We can show that this activity supports our business goals that they're giving us money for. Okay, so it's really, really important to understand why you might want to contribute. And then the second kind of roadblock we encountered is called an operational roadblock in our terminology.
So to make things clear, we've actually stated the why, the how, and the what, depending on the roadblocks we've encountered, or at least I've encountered while doing my research. And the very first one, like Jan just introduced, is unclear mandate or policy, where pretty much all developers here, if you feel that you don't have a clear mandate on how to contribute or how to, you know, what you can contribute, what you can do, go and ask your management to give you a mandate, to tell you what you can do and how far they are willing to, you know, stretch the limits. Because that is pretty much the biggest unblocker I've found, is just giving people the ability to start managing this stuff for themselves. Anyway, that also opens up everything for the lack of knowledge, which will reduce doubt, etc. That was a bit of skipping ahead, but like I said, we earlier had this slide on here as well. You probably remember it. These are real problems in a real organization of about 25 to 30 people. And let's try to solve this in a simple manner.
Okay, but you can't solve it unless you can't solve it effectively unless we create a why. Okay, and the why is management needs to understand that there's a business value to all of this. So let's talk about contribution to open source projects. And this is a question of longer term systematic thinking versus quick wins. These are, in general, the improvements that we spot in this stuff take time to be effective, and so it might be hard to push in companies with shorter horizons. But the first point is, without contribution, like, we wouldn't even be here. The open source ecosystem wouldn't be functioning. And, you know, frankly, you'd be a fool not to be on top of the technologies that you're actually basing your business on. Okay, you shouldn't outsource your core competence. And if your core competence is putting stuff together with Symfony or with Drupal or with Joomla or with pick a project, right? And you don't really deeply understand how it works and you're not part of it, it's not yours. And there's a grave, grave danger in that. There's way too much risk that you're taking on that way. So you want good developers? Why don't you make your developers better that you already have? If your developers are contributing to a major open source project, most of us at major open source projects are really fussy about the code that we let in to make those projects better. So your developers, you management, if you let people interact with us, right, your developers are going to come back better. Their coding standards are going to be better. They'll learn new perspectives and ways to solve problems. Okay, so you sort of get free training by allowing them to make code contributions to our projects. And, you know, there's really no way to stay up to date with what's going on than being involved with our communities and so on. So you should really also send them to events, community events, uncamps, bar camps, SymfonyCon, Drupal camps, what have you, because, you know, we're all building the web and we're all building the future of the web, and they, you know, get a chance to interact with all of you and come back inspired, right? And, you know, retention is a big issue in our industry. Chris and I met a guy a few months ago who said one of his lead devs was offered a job at another company with twice the salary in Romania, and that guy turned the job down because the company explicitly told him that there was going to be no contribution or interaction with open source communities possible, and the guy didn't want that. And I think that's a great argument for management needs to understand what keeps us happy, right? As developers, we need to be motivated and inspired, and being allowed to hang out with all of our open source friends, frankly, is it's a huge motivator for me. If you build a reputation as a company of being a place that's full of smart devs doing smart things, and you can point to code repositories and commit credits and say, look, our people are doing this, that's going to build a reputation on its own. And nowadays, especially compared to 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, nowadays savvy clients come and they say, so you say you can do media management, like that's a specialty of your company. You know, give me the Drupal.org usernames of your module maintainers and contributors. We're going to go look at their records. It's an actual selling point now. Like what you do on GitHub, where your company touches these sorts of things, ends up affecting your ability to sell your company's products and services. Clearly it affects your ability to hire. If you tell someone that you're hiring based on them being an awesome GitHub contributor, but then you say, now you're going to work inside this walled garden, right? I don't think that that's really effective. So you're going to have trouble hiring and retaining people. If you maintain that special in-house, I'm not sure the right term for a Symfony project, but you know, if you maintain that special magic pile of code that makes all your project works, makes all your projects work, right, and fixes all the special problems that you know about in your project, right? How many people have some equivalent of like our in-house fixes? Yeah, you can admit it. That's cool. Okay, yeah, right. So actually, from a management perspective, you've kept in a lot of risk in-house, right? And every single time there's an upgrade or an update to some of the packages that you're depending on, you have to go and fix that bundle of special magic code and so on. But if you let your developers take an hour, a day, 5 minutes, whatever it is, to put that fix and interact with upstream and give it a chance to become part of the main branch release, right? That problem is not only solved for you, it's solved for all of us, and you don't have to maintain that code in-house. You've exported risk and reduced the amount of risk that you're managing in-house, and that's great for your business. And it's less work that your team has to do in-house in the future, because that problem is simply done, right? So continuous contribution increases the quality and efficiency of your projects over time because your overall code bases are better. And then, you know, you also get this, you know, if you release everything that you do back to the community like you should, the community makes it better, and you get this upgrades are for free kind of effect that you can talk with your clients about. So, and then we have this one other idea. All of this is ways that you should interact with the projects that you work with, that you build projects with. There's a strong case to be made for letting your developers interact with projects that you're not delivering client projects with. You know, check out new software, get new perspectives, find how another project solves its problems, and you will get better developers back as well. So, if you get management to understand and believe this kind of stuff, right, you can get consensus and define a mandate, and then developers, you will be allowed to officially contribute, right? So let's presume that I've convinced management, and Chris will talk about how to actually enable the developers to do that.
All this talk,
I know.
All this management, you mumbo jumbo.
I'm sorry.
All right, so let's try and look at this from our perspective and actually solve this contribution problem. First thing we're going to have to do, at least in this situation I encountered, but I imagine this will be the same at your organizations as well, is to just increase contribution proficiency. Get to know your the projects you want to contribute to, get to know their coding standards, get to know their workflow, you know, just get a little bit handy and have some experience under your belt, but just really small patches if possible. the basic thing here is to just make sure that everybody in your organization, or all the developers in your organization, have some basic knowledge on how to contribute and what to contribute to. Because practice makes perfect, and a really good way to get that practice in is to just organize some internal sprints. This doesn't even have to be something your management has to pay for straight away. You could always say, let's organize a sprint every Wednesday evening and ask management if they could, hopefully give some pizza or something. But then spend your evening with your coworkers and your friends to just contribute to open source software and get better at it. Because by doing so, you are removing a lot of doubt and a lot of inexperience and a lot of time you would need normally to investigate how to contribute in order to be able to contribute pretty effectively and efficiently during working hours, which is a great argument later on, because if your contribution only takes 5 minutes, it's a lot easier for management to sign off on it than if it was going to take an hour and a half. So, by providing opportunity for training and contribution mentorship and just helping each other out, getting better at contribution, you can actually make contribution easier and therefore more effective during the day. So now you're a little bit more proficient in contributing. Well, you're still going to need to convince your employer or management or whoever to actually give you that mandate I was talking about earlier. Because without a mandate, you cannot just go and start contributing code on your own. I mean, who knows, for all you know, they were actually trying to keep that a secret or whatever, and had some bigger evil plans with it. So, thanks for distracting me, Jem. That's something management always does, it distracts you from things that are actually important. So anyway, just go and ask management for, a consensus, for mandate to be able to contribute during the week, during the day. If you have that, then you take away, first of all, any fear and doubt you might have because you have become more proficient, and also now you have the mandate to actually go on and contribute, which increases your experience even more. But we're not there yet. I mean, sure, it's pretty cool to know how to contribute and to be proficient at it, but you still need to implement it, put it into your working day in a way that you can actually do it efficiently. So a big part of my research focused on this because the organization I was researching for actually wanted to contribute more and more efficiently. And turns out that something I thought would be pretty difficult to wrap your head around is pretty easy. Looking at the organization in question and other organizations I've interviewed, this is pretty much the development workflow they use. I mean, here you have this ticket coming in Jira or whatever tool you have, you analyze it, and then you start developing the solution for the ticket, whether it be a bug or a feature request or whatever. If you've got a cool, a good process defined in your organization, you actually hand off your work to a coworker or a colleague to review that code. Hopefully he doesn't come back with anything, and you can just publish the code to production at the end. Turns out that open source isn't really that different. They also work with ticket systems, they also analyze their issues first, they develop a solution, go through a peer review process, and then commit it. So integrating the two isn't really that difficult. For instance, if you're developing a new feature on top of a module or a bundle that, helped you out or solved the use case for you, that wasn't already there, just make a pull request, submit a patch, share your work with the open source community. And while you're at it, have your coworker, who is reviewing your code anyway, also review your changes, also review your patch in the open source community, and sign off on it. Now you have a new feature, and somebody who wrote a review report about it, saying all is fine, this can be committed. Now all the maintainer has to do is actually commit it. But you can also use the work of others. I mean, who of you has ever had a feature request or a bug report where you just go and find out, like, I believe there's a patch for this, or I believe there's a pull request which I can use to, you know, solve this use case pretty quickly. Now you can actually take on the role as a reviewer, review the patch formally on, you know, the project page or on whatever medium the project in question uses. Write the review report and say, you know, this can be committed, and once again there is a solution to a problem with a review, and now the maintainer can just go ahead and commit the change. Really easy, right? And then there's the improving on the work of others. I mean, take the patch or the pull request I mentioned earlier, and figure out, yeah, there's still a little bug in here, or there's still something not quite right. You can improve it. Upload an updated patch or a pull request, and once again have your coworker review the original patch and your changes. And you're back in the same position where the maintainer only has to commit it. And the result of that is that contribution to open source is no longer something special. It's just the way how you work. It's how I work, and it works really well. Contributing something doesn't take much more than 2 or 3 minutes, because it's only just a process you have to go through. You know, you submit the pull request, you write a little description about it, and you're done. And by doing this over and over and over again, you get quicker at it, you get better at it, and you can actually show management, you know, we've contributed all these patches, all these pull requests. They've been merged into production now. So next time we need to use this module or this bundle or, you know, this framework, we can just take the completed product, patch and and don't have to worry about maintaining all that legacy or all that technical debt that you used to have if you had the code in your own little private special repository. So back to the management layer of this. Given this workflow and given all that Jam has told you so far, so what can we actually do to contribute? I've spent quite a few hours and hours and hours to come up with quite a few ways to contribute. This isn't an exhaustive list. You're not supposed to be able to read this because it's just to give you an idea of what's possible. Pretty much everything is possible. From submitting a small bug report to reviewing some code to you name it, everything that helps the community a little bit further is something you can do to contribute. To make it easier for you to share this with management, we've boiled it down to about the 7 most valued things according to all the people I interviewed and my personal experience. So, first of all, you need to contribute code. There wouldn't be open source software without the code. But in my opinion, reviews are even more important because there's so many patches, so many pull requests. But not so many people reviewing them, and therefore, you know, you have these pull requests that have stayed open for months and months at a time. It's just a waste of trouble. If just somebody reviews it, it can be committed, and nobody has to find it again. You can contribute to documentation, sponsorship, organize events, you know, you name it, and it's all for the better. So, to recap.
Yeah. So, I hope we all believe that open source is a good thing to use, and I hope I was able to, so I wanted to get us on the same page about why we're here. I hope that we were able to help you start thinking about how you can explain this to people who don't encounter open source usually, you know, management types. We talked about certain kinds of roadblocks and how to unblock them, and we're really, really hoping that we will enable more and more people to go and contribute. If you have any questions, we're pretty easy to find online, and yeah, we're going to be around here for the next couple of days, so I'd love to hear about everything that we forgot, and I really, really hope that you all can have more successful open source companies. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you all for coming.